We're on air, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to some of us. Thank you all for joining the Large Scale Scrum in New York, the largest and the fastest growing. Less Agile. Today we have a special guest joining us from Germany, Konstantin Ribel. I'm going to do a very quick introduction of the guest, and then I'll pass the baton over to him. And folks, could you please kindly put yourself on mute unless you are explicitly asking questions or speaking, and turn the cameras on if you can. So without any further ado, Konstantin is a certified Less trainer, one of very few in the world. Also a very seasoned Scrum Master. And I noticed throughout the way he presents himself, he actually is very proud of the title and of the role. And I'm with him in this. It's a very should be very respected and a seasoned role. So that's Konstantin's credentials. Also, it's worth knowing that he has spent quite a bit of time working at BMW in Germany with the group that was has been building autonomous driving vehicle, self-driving vehicle. I think you also work closely with Craig Larman, right? So at one point you have done work for them. He has done work in software development in the UK as well as in Germany over years, and has been involved in less huge adoption at BMW. So I think your case studies is based on that as well. Very interesting.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I would like to now, without burning any more time on this, would like to pass this on to you. First, I want to thank you for coming out and doing this for us. Your topic today is vicious effects of managing for utilization. And exactly. I heard you speak once on something similar and really got my attention. So that's why you're here, and I'm asking you to do this for us as well. I'll pass this on to you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm sharing the screen. You should be able to see something.
Yep.
Are you?
It's up.
Hold on. I lost your videos. One moment. Where are all the videos? I can see you.
Looks good.
Sec. Where are you? Where are all of you? Oh, now I have you. Okay. Good. Yes, thank you for the introduction. And the topic today is the vicious effects of managing for utilization. Quick introduction, just despite what, or in addition to what Gene said, I'm Konstantin Ribel. I like how you pronounce my last name. Born in Russia, live since 1996 in Germany, husband and father, enjoy outdoor activities. And why, or my experience, I worked in automotive, telecommunication, healthcare, and industrial technology industries. My software development experience goes back to 2005 as a developer. Then I worked also as a software architect, project manager, Scrum Master, and I now explicitly remove the Agile coach role because it's actually part of a Scrum Master role. Experience in organizational design for large-scale adaptive development started for me 2016 when I was on a search for a solution how to actually scale up development. And this is when I did my first certified Less practitioner. And after that, I became so involved with Less that 2019, I did my Less Friendly Scrum Trainer certification. And last year, September, I got also certified as a Less trainer. And you can connect with me, of course, on LinkedIn. Here is also the QR code to my profile. And when you post something about Less, would be great if you use this hashtag. And so that I know who all of you are, could you please scan this QR code and just answer the questionnaire? And I also put the link into the chat. So the question there is, how much experience do you have with Less? So the people less than a year, some 1 to 3 years, some 3 to 5 years, some over 5 years. Okay. That's good. So let's go through some opening topics. First, a disclaimer. All presented opinions are my personal opinions and do not express the views or opinions of my employers or my clients. And if you have any clarification questions, please ask right away. It's very important that that all of you understand the why and that you build up on the information that I will be giving you. For all the other questions, please use this Slido. Post your questions there. And this way I will be able to see on my other screen when questions will be popping up. You can also vote for questions. If the one question already exists, you can upvote a question and I will see it on my screen. And at the end in the Q&A, we will go through those questions. And I will also, I don't have the full link. Please use this one. Slido.com #063500. Good. Let's start with the Brooks Law. Who of you knows the Brooks Law? Gene, not you. No, please. No. When I'm asking this question, I'm expecting. Unmute yourself. Say what it is. Anyone, but not Gene. He knows that. Anyone?
I can jump in. Yeah, Brooks wrote about the diminishing return of adding more people to a project, right? Adding more people to a late project makes it later.
Exactly. Adding more people to a late project makes it even later. So let's refresh our knowledge about that, and let's also have a look at system thinking and causal loop modeling. I don't know how many of you did actually causal loop modeling. Karen, I think you're unmute. We can yeah, thank you. How many of you did causal loop modeling already? So let's refresh the knowledge of Brooks' Law by using causal loop modeling and see how it works. So it starts with number of developers or number of people and the feature output. And there's also some panic involved. And as feature output goes down, what happens?
Panic goes up.
Panic goes up, and we illustrate it in a causal loop diagram with an arrow. But this arrow is positive, so now it shows feature output goes down, panic goes down. Of course, it's the opposite. Therefore, we add an O as an opposite. So feature output goes down, panic goes up. As panic goes up, the hiring rate goes up and the number of developers goes up. As the number of developers goes up, the feature output goes down because people are new, don't know how the product works, and they need some time to actually learn about the product, about the customer domain, and so on and so on. Of course, the hiring rate is constrained by budget. So we illustrate a constraint like this. And when the hiring rate is constrained, budget is used up, the number of developers now is stable over time. So this double slash here means a delay. After some delay, usually long delay, years, the feature output goes up. And this is a belief that there is a linear scalability. Questions so far? No questions? Good. Then let's bring in the number of defects. So as feature output goes up, the number of defects goes up, of course, because the more we develop, the more mistakes we make. And the more mistakes we make, the more defects we create, the more we have to do bug fixing. So the feature output goes down with the increased amount of defects. And the loop on the left-hand side, we call reinforcing loop. It reinforces itself all the time. And we can usually see that there is a positive loop all the time. So for example, opposite and opposite, two opposites equals one positive. So like minus times minus is plus, right? So the same here. And this one we call the balancing loop. Questions so far? No? Okay, good. Now we come to the story of the vicious effects of managing for utilization. And I will be using a causal loop diagram to explain or to share my experience with you. So in this case, the hiring rate that I showed here is limited. So it's already constrained, and internal hiring for internal employment is not possible anymore. So what is possible is to hire subcontractors and vendors. So, but before we go to this place, let's have a look what happens in one requirement area if we want. What is the positive effect or positive behavior in one requirement area if we have a less huge scenario or in a simple less scenario in this product group? So when in one requirement area, the detailed knowledge of any team about topics and items all other teams in the area are working on is high, then the flexibility in item distribution between teams is also high. This is a typical consistent scenario if the optimization goal is adaptability. With a high flexibility in items distribution between teams, the workload of a team on a particular topic or a set of items goes down. So for example, if a team is working only on one component all the time, then they are limiting themselves to that one. But if the flexibility in item distribution between teams is high, then this is usually used, and the teams are keeping their scope actually wide. They don't narrow it. And when the workload of a team on a particular topic is low, then the ability to take time for learning about items about all the other teams increases, because you get items of other teams and so on. And the ability to take time for learning about other teams' items gets to the increases the detailed knowledge of any item about topics of other teams in one requirement area. This is now a positive reinforcing loop that we would like to see actually in any less adoption, that this works. This is, however, I can hear some noise. Can you?
I'm muted.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. In this case here, there is a limit to that. And the whole scenario here is limited by the number of teams in one requirement area. The higher the number of teams in one requirement area, the less chances and the less possibilities there are that the detailed knowledge of any team about topics of all the other teams goes up. So there is a natural limit at some point. And this is one scenario of the one point of view of the whole story. So as feature output here goes down, the management concern about goal reachability goes up. It increases, and the hiring rate of vendor teams also increases, which leads to a higher number of teams in one requirement area automatically. And we just said there is a natural limit. And when this happens, the ability to resolve technical dependencies by multi-team collaboration, for example, multi-team product backlog refinement, multi-team sprint planning, it goes down as well. So the detailed knowledge goes down, the ability to resolve technical dependencies also by multi-team collaboration goes down, and the ability of team helping each other finishing items also goes down, which leads to invisible queues or work in progress or invisible backlogs, or more of the invisible backlogs, which in turn leads to less flexibility on item distribution between teams. Questions so far? I might be talking too fast, so just let me know if I am. Okay. With a high number of invisible queues and work in progress, or a higher number of invisible backlogs, what also happens is that the feature output goes down, because teams don't see anymore what has actually higher value. One team might work on the highest priority number one, or highest value items, and another team can be working on the lowest value item from the global perspective and not even notice that. So what then also happens usually is management has the need to maximize utilizations of teams. And this also leads to invisible queues and invisible backlogs, especially if those teams cannot work from the same big backlog. Well, there's also the topic of broadness of work a vendor team is actually able to do. So we are hiring now, we have internal teams. You cannot hire internal teams anymore. Now we're hiring vendor teams. Vendor teams come in, but their broadness of work is limited. So what does this actually do? So this leads to the APO's ability, this limits the APO's ability to provide or generate items a vendor team can work on. So if the broadness of work the vendor team can do is really high, they can really do a lot of variety of work, then it's easier for the APO to provide actually some some customer-centric end-to-end items or problems to the team to solve. But this is usually not the case. So it's actually the other way around. So the broadness of work vendor team is able to do is narrow. The APO is not able to provide much, even they try, as well as the amount of teams in one requirement area. If that is too high, especially too many vendor teams that cannot do, all of them cannot do some broad work, the ability to provide actually items goes down. Any ideas what happens then? Considering the need for utilization, high utilization. No ideas? Gene, not even you?
I'm sorry, I'm explicitly keeping myself out of this conversation. No.
Yeah,
because yeah.
What happens? No, that was for the first question.
And so this one is what happens if
we have many teams in one requirement area, especially vendor teams. Yeah. So a mixture of vendor teams and internal teams.
Yep.
The vendor teams are not able to do broad work. Not yet. They are new. The APO, therefore, the APO is not able. I mean, he is able to give them some end-to-end customer problems to solve, but the team is simply not able to do that. So if you give such an item to a team, they will not finish that. So they require that they want some specifically for them designed items so that they can actually do them. What happens then? But the APO simply doesn't have resources, time, or whatever to actually deliver such items to those teams, provide such items to those teams so that they can work on them.
The way you frame this, especially with the vendor being engaged, I think what is written on the wall for me is how is this even contract being structured? If it's structured in a very legacy traditional way, outsourcing them, there could be some additional challenges because they will be managing themselves to the SOW with fixed contract budget and scope. And if they're on a team, it will raise the whole new array of problems. So it's almost like a problem, right? That's what I see.
So that's a very good point with the contract. What I forgot to mention, I'm not sure whether what I'm presenting is even a problem in the US. I really don't know, because the scenario I'm describing depends heavily on the contract, like Gene said, and it also heavily depends on the labor law that exists in a country. So what we see here specifically is, well, the most limitations that we have here is because of the labor law in Germany, but the contract that was set up with the vendors plays also a big role. So what happens next is that the APO says, oh, I cannot provide like narrower items, because this then goes actually towards single component stuff. So the more the APO, the less the PO or APO is able to actually provide items to those teams, the more delegation of item creation on component level and prioritization goes to an internal team. Sorry, here it says fellow team. What I mean here, internal team. Yes, APO is area product owner. Someone's asking that. By the way, this is a perfect question to just unmute yourself and ask. So the APO. So the APO delegates this whole stuff. Okay, please create some items together with the vendor teams or for the vendor teams just for single components because right now they cannot not do more work. This leads to a higher number of vendor teams an internal team has to support. So if this whole cycle continues, the hiring rate of a vendor team is still high. The number of team in one area is still high. This whole cycle continues, and then we end up with one internal team dealing with 1, 2, 3 vendor teams. And if that happens, then some clusters within one area start to emerge. So then there is like a internal team and several vendor teams, and those are like a cluster, because then the APO says, oh, thanks God there is an internal team. They take care of all dealing with those vendor teams, especially that they cannot do some broad work for us. Well, if this is the case, then the internal team acting as a so-called product owner or team output owner increases. And of course, the detailed knowledge of any team about topics or items all other teams in the area are working on decreases. So we can see here already, here at the bottom, we can see here one reinforcing loop, a negative reinforcing loop. The second, this is now the third negative reinforcing loop for this same problem. So when this happens, or hold on, before we go further, any questions so far? Well, okay. So when this happens, then the time an internal team spends with a vendor team onboarding, teaching, coordinating, clarifying goes up. So when that happens, at some point, the system and technology stack understanding of the vendor team goes up, and they can actually start doing some broad work. But this is constrained by legal and contractual boundaries that exist in a country, for example, in Germany, with the labor law and the contract that is set up. Therefore, the system and technology stack understanding of the vendor team is actually heavily limited. And the broadness of work the vendor team is able to do is also limited, or goes down, or actually never gets bigger, which leads to less ability to work on highest priority items. This in turn, so there is now less ability to work on highest priority items. This increases the need to just generate items, to just utilize the teams, even if it's only nice to have work. And this is constrained, even amplified by the contractual obligation to utilize the vendor teams. So this is a typical scenario when there is a fixed price contract set up, and the vendor teams want to are paid by the item, for example. Then of course they want to finish items.
Konstantin, just to make sure I'm tracking with the visuals on the screen, is the opposite item that's between ability to work on highest priority and need to generate in the wrong spot? Or am I just not understanding it feels like it should be prior to their ability to work on the highest priority team or things, right?
So if the ability is to work on highest priority items is low, I mean, let's go to the broadness of work a vendor team is able to do.
Yep.
So the broadness of work the vendor team is able to do is actually narrow. If it's very narrow, then the ability to work on highest priority items is also low. And
So
if the ability is...
So that the
No.
low
It's
shouldn't be
no.
there. It should be the one over.
Broadness goes down, ability goes down. It's a positive connection, right?
Okay, got it. That's just me
And-
learning the nomenclature of the visuals. So thank you.
Okay. Good. That's good. And if the ability goes down, the need, and they say, oh, we cannot work on anything right now. Then the need to generate items to just utilize the teams, even if it's only nice to have items, goes up. And I would like to underline here the amount of work for the now internal teams to create those nice to have items to just utilize the teams is enormous. So the number of items of lower value or lower priority in order to satisfy contractual needs goes up a lot. Of course, the value of work product delivered by the vendor team goes down. And with that, the feature output also goes down. So this is now what I believe the fourth reinforcing loop we have here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, the fourth reinforcing loop here. So next, the time spent actually with the vendor team, onboarding, teaching, coordinating, and clarifying, the time an internal team has available to work on own items goes down. I mean, obviously, right? So what happens then is that, and together with the internal team acting as a so-called product owner or team output owner, the mismatch between what people have been told they will do when hiring them and what they actually do increases. So people are told, hey, you are going to work here internally on this cool stuff, and now they're coordinating some vendor teams. Then this leads to some frustration about not being able to work on own items, of course. And this is now a belief that over time, the engagement and motivation to fully commit to topics and items at hand goes down. So there is this belief that high frustration leads to less engagement. And this in turn also creates a negative reinforcing loop to the feature output. Everyone is so silent. Questions?
People are digesting system modeling that you have presented, which is pretty intuitive.
What's interesting to me, or what validates these concepts in my own personal experience, is having experienced the transformation at Target here in the United States, from an environment where there are about 80% contractors, 20% FTEs, and experiencing the flip and also the reduction of the number of people on the teams. And then watching the increase of the satisfaction of the engineering staff and the culture that was created and the innovation that came from those folks being empowered to go do real work. As much as this is an eye chart, when it's all said and done after it's all been built, it's absolute truth as far as what I've seen in real life. So, and engagement went up, even though we cut 35% of the headcount at headquarters. Engagement went up, productivity doubled, your stock price is 5 times what it used to be, all that kind of fun stuff that came with it. And they've got an engineering culture that's second to none as far as I'm concerned.
So Konstantin, I think you're in mute. You're in the.
Sorry. Yeah.
mode.
No.
So you're soliciting questions now and feedback. And
Yeah. I see 2 points here, and the question is, what is an IPO? We've answered that already, and I have seen this in my companies, in many companies, someone said.
Konstantin, this is
yeah.
Malcolm. Can you just go back one slide so we can see all the causal loop diagram?
Sure, of course.
When you were building the entire, trying to integrate the vendor team, when you first completed your first causal loop of trying to integrate the second causal loop of the integrating the vendor team, meaning it goes from broadness of work over to ability to work on highest priority items, opposite relationship to need, that loop. And then you said it's reinforcing, and I'm trying to basically trace where it's reinforcing, because I see an odd number of opposite effects. So if you could walk through I just got lost on that particular one. I mean, I believe the concept is true. I'm just trying to read the graph.
Okay, you're approaching it mathematically. Okay, I see. I also see your point right now. That is an indicator that there might be a variable lost somewhere, or maybe I didn't think of one that needs to be included. So basically, if we go here from feature output, blah, 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 we come to here point, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're right. There is an odd number of opposites. Yeah, there might be a variable missing that I didn't think of yet.
I mean, right, because the concept is not earth-shattering, right? I mean, so the concept just is just testing the temperature, or just whatever kind of just linguistic approach you want to take is pretty straightforward. It's just the way it's graphed. I got lost trying to see the actual graph.
Okay. What is interesting that you say it's not earth-shattering? Sure. I totally agree. Still, what is interesting is that companies do not deal with the issue. So for whatever reason, this part here still exists and still continues to exist. And all the time, for whatever reason, it happens all over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds a lot like anthropology. It's really, I mean, it's context, and then there's this whole little society that's built up over years, and it's changing that society that seems to be more the issue.
So Peter-san is asking, Pete, maybe you can unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one of the observations that I had as you were going through the flow is that one of the original flow that you did, and then also this flow, a key part, and I could just be biased because I spend more of my time in business management consulting, the fact that it's a management concern about the ability to accomplish a goal based on an invalid metric, most likely, is what's driving hiring and driving. So like, to me, if you can help educate, and I guess the question for, I won't go to root cause, I won't go to fixing it, but in your experience, how do you help tackle the management side of that equation to kind of stop some of those loops from occurring? And I've got all kinds of, we've got all kinds of outcomes-based stuff and executive coaching and blah, blah, blah. But I'm just curious from your point of view, from an engineering perspective, how do you help leadership recognize that we shouldn't panic and hire a bunch of other folks to come in and do the work?
Mm-hmm. So what I experienced is that actually involving managers into the work that the internal team and the vendor team are doing, all of this coordination work, and showing what actually gets delivered. So this is a form of go and see, I would say. The management gains the insight about what is really happening. So there is an opinion of management, what is happening, or an expectation, and then there is the reality. So as soon as you bring managers into this work that the internal teams and vendor teams are doing together, and you let them observe that, and then what I experienced, what often happens is that first, there is an insight that, well, maybe we should not spend, the money that we're spending on that is not well spent. We should reduce that or stop that. So I've seen that happening. And what is not shown here, of course, is the opposite view of that is when there are real impediments that are not shown here that the vendor team has. So the vendor team has the ability actually to work broader, but there are some impediments, and those impediments were not removed for a long time. So removing those impediments and giving them the chance to do that also solves some issues. So there is, of course, a balance, but still more towards looking at the real issue at hand, realizing that there is less the value of having internal teams working with the vendor teams because of all the limitations here is low, and then reducing the number of vendor teams. Yeah, so this is the most what I've seen happening so far.
Got it. Thank you.
The most surprising, I would say, or no, not surprising, the most funny thing, funny situations for me was when managers turned up to the internal teams, and the internal team said, we do not need the vendor team. They are actually making us slower. And the manager then asks, okay, but who will do all the work that they were supposed to do? And the internal team says, we're going to do it ourselves. And then you see the surprised face of the manager. Big surprise, almost a disbelief. And then after asking many times, are you really sure? And the team says yes. Then they take the information. Sometimes they do something about it, they believe it, and they say, okay, you decided, but then I also expect it from you that you actually do the work, or they do not believe. Further questions?
Folks, at this point, just feel free to unmute yourselves. Great comments are great in chat, but they've been better when you voice a Karen. Just ask if you don't mind. Unmute and ask.
I'm very good at following directions. I'm not driving in my car anymore. So again, I do organizational change management, and I'm in a large project right now. And, you know, I was wondering if you could explain, you know, the invisible cues that you referred to. How and why do they form? How do you know they're there? How do you address them?
Okay, that's okay. So as soon as the teams in one requirement area are not able to work all together on the highest value items in the backlog, and this is a big and there is a need for utilization in the company for various reasons why the need is there. We don't go into that direction for now, but there is this need. what happens then is, oh, we need to create some items for those particular, for some teams that are not able to work on the highest value items in the backlog. We need to create specifically for those teams some items and put them to the top of the backlog so that they can pull them in the sprint planning. So what happens then, the product owner or the area product owner in terms of less huge, they look at, okay, we have enough work now for this team. We have now enough work for this team. We prioritize it. So what happens then? It's only theater, right? So it looks like a one backlog, but in reality, and that's why it's invisible or hidden, if you look closely and you observe the situation in the whole organization, then you see that the product owner put some items to the top of the backlog for that team, and then put another set of items to the top of the backlog for another team, and so on. So, but if you compare the values, the real values of those all items, then the highest value items are actually maybe at the bottom of the backlog, and only some of lower value items are at the top, and so that the teams can pull it and are utilized for one sprint. Plus, yeah, Jean just posted annual budgets. We need to spend some budget this year, otherwise we will not get it next year. Sure, also one. Does it answer your question, Karen? You're muted.
So, yes, it answers my question, but how do they ignore the prioritization and have things that aren't priorities? It's like they're ignoring
yeah.
the whole structure of how we're going to do this, and it's like thrown out.
There is, in those situations, there is often a belief that, oh, I'm going to put this work now to the top of the backlog because we are going to need it anyway. So this is mostly caused by the belief that, oh, everything is important anyway, so it doesn't matter in which order we do the stuff. And this behavior is usually caused by an internal contract in the company between some business and development. I don't know if you know the term contract game. If you're familiar with that. No, it's basically when the business side and the development side or group in a company sign or agree on a contract, and the contract defines what the business side expects from the development side to actually deliver. And it also states how much budget they get for that. It also states when it should be delivered, and so on. So the typical iron triangle of fixed scope, fixed time, fixed budget. And this is then set in the contract between those two parties, internal parties of the same organization. And then there is this belief that, oh, the contract is set, we need to deliver everything anyway, so it doesn't matter which order we are going to do it. But in reality, I've never seen any company in my life that actually delivered the full contract, the full scope of that contract at the particular point in time that was agreed in that contract. So in reality, it never gets delivered. So at the late stage of the development, there is usually some prioritization or some deprioritization, descoping. This is the better the better description of what's actually happening. Descoping, and this descoping, it would be much more valuable if it would happen earlier, and the product owner would actually put to the top of the backlog what is very important and not try to shift items in the backlog around so that teams are utilized. Does that explain or answer your question? Or is there more?
Yeah, thank you. Again, it seems like it's going away from the heart of what, you know, you're trying to do. I mean, is less, you know, does it follow agile?
Karen?
What
This is-
percent of less is agile?
Karen, this is Malcolm. I'm
Yes,
just one of I'm just another like Yahoo like you. And I think actually what you've discovered is you agree with Konstantin's point that it makes no sense. This is what's happening. He's just spent an hour saying this dynamic exists and it
Yeah.
really isn't serving anything well. And you're going, this dynamic shouldn't exist. What's up? So you're agreeing with Konstantin that, yeah, I mean, that's what's going on.
Yeah, probably, yes. Yeah, this dynamic should not exist. That's right. So this is a typical dysfunction and should be dealt with.
Yeah, so Konstantin is really just giving this tool of, you know, the diagram is just a tool to try and map what's really happening. And so what we've been talking about is a typical dysfunction that lots of corporations or lots of human endeavors see, because it's not only software development. And so you're right, it isn't serving the ultimate process. And this is just a way to help prove, a lot of times, I suspect, if you involve management in the discussion about why it's not that whole conversation about we can just get rid of the vendors and we'll do it all in-house, and the manager goes, really? This kind of conversation can educate the manager about why the problem exists and where it exists.
It's just one thing, folks. By the way, we have only a couple of minutes remaining. Don't shoot the messenger. So with system thinking, and that's what Konstantin has done, he is delivering to you a painful message, and he does not do it explicitly. He does it implicitly through system modeling, and that's the power. That's the real power of this coaching tool, because you make people see what they no longer cannot see, and they start getting frustrated, maybe a little with Konstantin, but more so with themselves or with the surrounding. So forgive him.
Yeah, that's basic.
I know it's been a while since I've, you know, been doing causal loops. I do have, you know, Sengi's original book that I can look at.
He doesn't have it, but he explains it well, systemic with beer. Yes.
Yeah.
I have
And-
two quick questions specifically on the topic, please. Konstantin, when you mentioned these internal contracts, is it related to OKRs? Have you heard the term OKR?
I have heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
New
Yes, I
buzzword.
heard that. The new buzzword. Yes, I heard that. Not sure. I've never worked with them.
Okay, so
No,
yeah, the internal contracts, right? So now they set objectives and key results for all the business units, including business and IT. So I think you know, the way you explain it, it may relate to internal contracts. And of course, my interest, because it's a new buzzword, is it part of the negative trend, or it's a part, you know, part of the positive trend? I'm trying to put it into, you know, into this category.
Yeah. I don't know, because I've never used them. I don't fully know what it is. Never used them. But what I really experience in my life is when the business side and the development side negotiate for months what is going to be in that contract, and then the contract is
Sealed.
The sealed, and there is then a special term that I heard in the companies. Now it is signed with blood, and we need to deliver it. And we need to deliver the full scope of that. And this creates lots of this dysfunction definitely that we see here, plus many others. And this is of course, opposite of what we would expect in an adaptive company or an organization.
So,
And
second question, so I wanted to see like the summary. I mean, now it became clear to everybody that we all know the negative kind of effect that started with management concern, and then you kind of broke it down in 20 steps, because sometimes it's very hard to explain to management, hey, your concern is the key, and we're running around creating some kind of comfort zone for you, wasting time and not being productive just to kind of appease you, right? So you put kind of science behind it. So there is a list of negative trends that generate from here. What is the list of positive trends? Like you say, what are you come in and you look at the organization and you say, okay, here's the sign of healthy, agile organization. What would be the bullet points there?
Roman, I think you may want to reframe it.
Really good.
Yeah. Okay. So I made a list.
Really okay.
Yeah, it is good.
Oh, you got it, Konstantin?
I made the list. Yeah. So maybe it will be helpful. So I made a list based on this presentation of negative trends. Like you come in and you can within a couple minutes identify is it healthy or not healthy. So for example, negative trends, management concern of deliverability. You attend couple meetings and all they ask is, when are you going to be done? Are you sure? Do you need more consultants? So immediately the red flag, okay. We base our decisions on annual budgeting, right? You're in the meeting and say, according to annual budget, we got to have so many people, so we keep hiring. So that would be like another red flag. Managers like to have a high count underneath, under them, right? Rather than the productivity team. So you would say, why are we not measuring, the productivity of the team by the deliverables rather than how many people we have working, and they start counting story points, how many they deliver, stuff like that. So that would be the negative trend. You mentioned not a true prioritization, because they say it still has to be delivered, right? Not sticking to the value-based planning, I would say. So if they talking about just do something and not using logic or justification for items in the product backlog. So that would be the negative. Internal. Okay, so, and that's where I stopped on the
list.
on my negative trends, but I want to take away positive trends that maybe we can like coach and try to implement. So like, would you say smaller internal teams, something like that?
No. Less of vendor teams. And what I mean, it's not the amount of vendor teams that is the issue here, actually. It might work, but in this particular case, the issue here is this constraint over here. But if we leave this whole conversation here aside, and if I come into a customer and observe in the first few weeks what's happening, and I see that the developers, or the teams, not the developers, the teams, and the team members directly deal with the real users and end customers, that's usually a good sign that they are solving customer problems and not working on some made up list just to utilize themselves.
Yeah, with your permission,
so this is one thing that I'm working on. Yeah.
I apologize. I was gonna, with your permission, I'm pinging in the chat. Those that are interested in what you have been describing so far with legal contracts, boundaries, they should read Agile Contracts Primer from one of Les books. It's free. People can download it. It's actually written by Craig Boss, the co-founders of Les, as well as the attorney, a legal attorney who has been very experienced with writing legal contracts for true external projects, not projects, fake internal projects, external projects. So it's a very easy to download and read thing.
Yeah, and one important thing also I wanted to mention, even when vendors are already involved, what I pay attention to is whether the contracts, the first thing, if I hear there are vendors involved, I ask what kind of contracts do they have? Right? What is the relationship between the company, well, that is hiring those vendors? Do they have a win-win situation by the contract, or is there a win-lose situation by design in the contract?
That's absolutely correct, because most of the time vendors interested in staying on the project, not finishing the product. That
yeah, and there are many different types of contracts, and I tend now these days to directly ask, if I see vendors involved, what is the type of contract? Why should they be motivated? What is driving their motivation? What is driving the motivation of the company hiring them? Is there, by design, at least a win-win situation for both? But because only then they can actually succeed. Yeah, if the vendors feel themselves as on the losing end, then it's bad for the company hiring them, right? And vice versa.
Absolutely, that's a very good point.
Gene, how much time do we have?
We actually out of time, but if you want to take a few extra minutes, I'm advising everyone also to connect with you on LinkedIn, and will be uploading your stuff in the facility so everyone can see. Yeah.
Thank you. By the way, if you could, I mean, if we can continue to chat, but if you are leaving, it would be great if you could scan the code and leave some feedback. It's just an Amazon star rating.
And you have to teach me how do you do it. This is a pretty slick thing. You can just scan with your phone, and off you go. You know, you're done. Pretty cool. I'll
just like Uber. It's your Uber rating.
I'm
thank you.
Old fashioned.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so like I said, we can still continue the discussion here. Any other questions?
Hey, Konstantin, if I may also softly, it's not a promotion, just to let you know, if you happen to know anyone who travels to Germany, Munich anytime soon, you have an upcoming LESS training there, right?
I have an upcoming LESS training in March, yes.
In March, in the case someone wants to be in Germany for that. And I'll also ping everyone where it sits, where you can find all this information. I'll be posting the video and the deck. So you can all come here in a couple of hours and you will see there and pass it on to your colleagues.
Yeah, I because I found this one typo, we'll fix the typo and resend you the file.
Not a big deal, but you can, yeah. Sure.
Thank you, Konstantin. Thank you, Gene. Excellent job. Thank you for your efforts.
Exactly, and we appreciate you all coming out and contributing, giving input. System thinking isn't something that's easy to digest, from start, but once you get hooked on it, it's like a drug. Not that I know, but
yeah,
you can't get off of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I forgot to say, of course, this is my mental model that I have here. I've let many people challenge this, and we all came to the conclusion that it's more or less close to the reality.
Yep.
Yeah, I spent some weeks working on that some years ago. Yeah.
And people can try to
Okay.
report it internally, right? Let everyone take to their internal space, whether it's a client or an employer, and rework it and see if things will change in their domain, which is probably unlikely based on what you say, right? If you do it 150 times, most likely this similar dynamic will be in the 151st time.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Well, folks, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Konstantin, special thanks to you for coming out. Be well, be healthy, all. Have a great weekend, and we'll share with you the recording very soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
Back
thank
to the
you.
kids.
Be well.
Yeah.
Back to your families.
Thank you very much for
so
having me.
much. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming out, Konstantin.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.